Hello everybody and welcome to the Human Echoes recap for Westworld Season 2 Episode 5, Akane no Mai. And Akane no Mai, by the way, for those of you who did not look up the translation, means the Dance of Akane. Our second bilingual title of the season, as far as my count goes. The previous one being Fortuna El... whatever the other thing was in Fortuna. And we're kicking things off in the future, the farthest along present timeline that we have, the cleanup timeline, right? The guys who have come in to fix everything, to put everything back together, are trying to put everything back together, and we get information we already had from these guys. We know that they're still looking for Abernathy. They have not found Abernathy yet. The new information that we get, though, is that at least a third of the hosts that they have in their possession are completely clean on the mental front. And not just like they've been wiped, but the guy who's scanning them says literally like they haven't ever had data on them before. What does that mean? I read some stuff after the episode, directly after the episode, and I didn't see anybody with like any theories that I don't think I even saw anybody talking about that. This seems like something that's pretty huge to the whole mystery of Westworld, that you have hosts that are just complete blank slates. Does Dolores end up printing hosts? Does she just get in there and start making hosts and turning them on and seeing what happens with no data whatsoever? Or is this some kind of a diversion? Are these are they copies of so we saw the Teddy host laying in the water, right? In the future timeline, and he's dead at that point. At least we think we saw him. The people say that we saw him, so I'm gonna go with that. Maybe he's a copy. Maybe there's like a different Teddy somewhere. Maybe they've made copies of themselves so that they'll think that they have more dead than they do, but they're actually hiding out, waiting to pop out. That seems like the best, most possible, most likely scenario to me, is that they're doing the Jurassic Park thing, where they count the number of dinosaurs, and as long as they get to the upper level that they wanted to get to, they assume everything's fine, and they don't realize that there's more dinosaurs than what they were counting. Which is going to be a cool moment if that's what happens. And then the other thing is that these backups that they have been destroyed. So the backups of, I guess, the host's personalities and possibly all this research they've been doing into sort of the reincarnation, immortality robot thing that they were working on. I guess that's all gone now. So the Delos guys are really having a bad day. And unfortunately, we're not going to get to find out more about that bad day because the rest of the episode takes place in the park. And we start off with Maven the Samurai. All right, we left off that thread at the end of the episode before last, where this guy was coming at her, and she doesn't get killed immediately because of course she doesn't. I mean, it was a cool cliffhanger to reveal that there were samurai, but I don't think anybody was like, and now Maeve's dead because the samurai's rushing at her. She just dodges the blade, and she does her. Tries to do her voice command takeover thing on the samurai. And my initial belief about this was that the samurai was being very clever. So she tells him to put away his sword and to tell his comrades to be cool, which he kind of does, right? But also, he has them cover her mouth, which is not explicitly against the instructions that she gave him, and I thought that would, if I was this guy and I'm like, okay, I've just been compelled to do something I didn't want to do by this person, by them talking, I'm going to shut them up. That's how I would have gone with it. I would have immediately tried to get their mouth closed before they could go any further, and there's several moments in this episode where that does happen, but as it turns out, that's not what's going on in this first scene. What's going on here is that I guess he just decides not to kill them for reasons, and that her commands don't work on them because they're not reverting to her language. So the way that Lee explains it, the programmer storyline guy, explains it, is that normally in these parks, the hosts would change to whatever language you were speaking, because it would suck if you wanted to go to Shogun World, but you had to learn like perfect Imperial Japanese before you got there. That would seem a little bit like of a bummer, like maybe you wouldn't get the full experience. But these guys, because their default is Japanese, are just stuck on that. And, you know, it's a reveal that, as we already knew, it's not just Westworld that's all boogered up by this crazy thing that has been set off by Robert Ford. So they're taken prisoner, they go into Shogun World, and almost immediately they realize this is essentially a copy of Westworld in a lot of ways. And there's a lot of clues to that. First off, they play the, I think it's Paint It Black song, but like on a traditional Japanese instrument. I could not name the instrument, I'm sorry. It wasn't a piano, but it had that sort of down, like the twangy sound that you get from the sort of oriental style stringed instrument. Again, I apologize for being less specific. The town is set up exactly like Sweetwater was set up, and even down to the characters in the town are essentially carbon copies of Maeve and her gang, which I thought was a little bit convenient that like her people were the ones who ended up being the ones that they saw as like we don't see the Dolores, you know, copy, if that exists in this world, or the Teddy sort of doppelganger. It's just these three. But it's narrative convenience, so let's sort of let that ride. And maybe we did see them and I just did not note them well enough. So that's something that the commenters can feel free to correct me on. As they walk into town, though, before they get to sort of Samurai Sweetwater, I have to mention one of the scientists that they're carrying along with them, one of the sort of low-level programmers, the white guy, notices that they've killed a bunch of these sort of police force from the town, and they have this very different weapon, which I thought was cool because I had never seen this weapon in a movie before. Maybe it's just because I haven't watched enough samurai movies, but you know, normally the classic samurai weapon is the sword, and maybe like a staff, but this is like a big stick with a bunch of sharp bits at the end that still like slices and pokes and stuff. And I thought that was really neat that they sort of broke out of the mold a little bit and showed us something that I hadn't seen. Maybe other people had. But the line here, I wrote this down because it made me so happy. He observes the fact that they've killed these policemen in Shogun World, and he calls the people that they're with samurai cop killers. Which in my weird brain, I refuse to be convinced that this is not a reference to the terrible, terrible, terrible movie Samurai Cop. I mean, if it's not, don't let me know. Don't write me, Jonathan Nolan. Don't write a comment. I don't want to hear about how you've never seen Samurai Cop, because that's just let me live in my wonderful bliss of thinking that that is the case, and that's what we're referencing here. In the meantime, Dolores also comes back to Sweetwater, the real Sweetwater this time, not the Shogun version, and she's gonna get on board with some train repair. I guess her people there know how to do that and have the equipment to fix a train. Maybe it's not, maybe the structure of the train is not damaged, right? Maybe she's just having them, sort of shore up the windows where they've been shot out. There's clearly some kind of battle has gone on here, and I don't fully understand what it is that they're walking into. It's possible that Delos has been through here and shot up the town, and that's why all this is like this. But I don't know if it's safe to assume that in a show like Westworld. But again, I don't have alternate theories, but I'm just interested, let's say, in figuring out why this town has been so decimated. Again, maybe it's just Delos and they came through and, took care of the problem and they moved on to Dolores later and now she's finding what's left. But I don't think we've seen that, so I'm not going to 100% assume that. In the background of this, we get the new Clementine. right? We saw back in the first season where Clementine, the prostitute who was sort of under Maeve, had sort of gone off script and gotten replaced. And we have the actress that is playing old Clementine, right? Zombie Clementine, essentially, running around with Dolores and her gang. But now she meets up with her copy. And she's already damaged somehow, all right? I've been calling her Zombie Clementine not just for kicks. Like, it seems like there's something not all there with her. But now she sees this thing that's a perfect copy of her personality, not her physical attributes, although couldn't tell you why. They don't just make multiple copies of the same robot. It would seem like it'd be easier. But she sees this robot that is acting exactly in the same way that she would act, and it's messing with her head. And that's a theme that we're gonna see throughout this episode. Maeve has several of these moments as well, and a lot of the other people that are with her. My gut feeling about this is that this is related to what we saw in the previous episode, where the human created host, right, with the human brains, started to have problems when they realized that they weren't human, right? The moment... Now, I in my previous recap, I talked about maybe it was the man in black who was sort of triggering this in his father-in-law, but as some of you pointed out, the better probable explanation is that he just can't accept this idea. He can't fully internalize the fact that he's not still alive. And I think that's what our hosts are going through as well, but not in the same way. Like, it's not breaking them in the same way. They're able to better process it, where Clementine's already messed up, so we don't get too much of it with her. But Teddy is, even though he doesn't see his doppelganger, he's sort of going through a process of realization. He's still like trying to like jolt himself into realizing what kind of a thing he is, and it's hard for him to let go of the old life. Maeve in this episode is the best example of this, though, and we'll get to her in a bit. Before we do, though, we have to go back to Shogun Sweetwater, where Maeve is seeing a script play out that she's seen before, right? It's the, rogue sort of criminal element invades, and they're playing the Robin Hood type to the local sort of army people, and they're trying to get money for their resistance or whatever. All of this plays out in exactly the same way, right? The setup is the same, like the safe falls in the same way. And it's fortunate that I was really appreciative of the previously on Westworld this week, because it showed this is exactly how that happened, which I probably would have forgotten because I'm dumb and I don't remember all the way back to season 1 some of the little specifics. Maeve, though, because she knows that this is like a script, tries to break the flow. Just listen, guys, I can tell you how this is, like, let's not run this story, all right? We can make our own. Let's talk. Unfortunately for her, talking involves like an insane amount of pageantry and the sort of the geisha doing their traditional geisha dance, and Maeve having to sit there and sip tea, and Lee cautions her not to rock the boat too much because maybe things won't go well for them, because this is a more rough and tumble world, and these people seem to be some level of self-actualized. My hang up here is once Maeve has a grip on the language, like somehow she figures out how to flip the switch and toggle, her Japanese language, so she's able to communicate with them, which is fine. I don't know why immediately she just doesn't say to them, all right, let me go. Like, I'm not here for you. I don't want to be in Shogun land. I'm going for my daughter. I want to go back to, I need to get there. It's kind of a big deal. They take, a roundabout route. Like, she has a goal that she's going for with the access, the hatch that Lee tells her about, that goes from the one Shikura girl's, home village, her cornerstone area. But it doesn't, again, I don't think they were planning on going into Shogun World. It seems like that was something that Lee would have brought up or planned for or something. So just go back to Westworld and do the thing you were planning on doing. And I'm not complaining about all the cool samurai stuff. if I was Maeve, I would just be like, screw all of this. Y'all are robots and you're doing your own thing, so I'm out of here. The only potential explanation is that she wants to touch base with this Shogun, right? This leader who seems to be doing things off script and might be self-actualized himself, that he's come alive, that he's become free, for lack of a better word. And maybe Maeve is interested enough in another one of these types of people to put the quest for her daughter aside, but that really seems like a stretch. The next scene we get is a scene between Teddy and Dolores, and Dolores talks about the blue tongue disease that the cattle got with her dad. And this is a thing I believe they referenced in season 1. I feel like I remember it from season 1, although memory's tricky. And how that eventually they had to burn all of these cattle that, were sick and diseased, and the flies were carrying the disease. And Teddy's response is really interesting, because she asks Teddy before she tells them what what this cure was for this problem. She says, "What would you do?" And he says, "Well, I would take all the weak and the sick. I would separate them out. I would put them in a different barn where they wouldn't, the flies would have a harder time getting to them, and, wait it out." And Dolores is like, "Yeah, we burned them. So not that answer." And this is really the beginning of, I think, the show definitely telling us, yes, it's okay to start thinking of Dolores as not your protagonist anymore. Because season 1 Dolores, I think, was very much fashioned as someone who you could get behind and you could really root for, and she's been a slave this whole time, and in this world that she doesn't understand, and sort of manhandled and pushed around. But the thing that has resulted from that Dolores is a much more ruthless, unsympathetic character that is not someone not someone I can get behind, especially with how she plays this out. And let's take this to its let's split these timelines up rather than cutting in between, because they don't really intersect other than just being edited between. But Dolores, goes on with her plans, and after this conversation with Teddy, she takes him back to her room, right? They get a room. Finally, Dolores and Teddy getting it on, possibly for the first time ever. But before they do, Dolores says to Teddy, because he pitches to her this idea of, let's not have this revolution. Let's not go off and have this fight. Let's just, me and you, two fully self-actualized beings, right? That we know what we are, and we understand, we're free now. Why don't we just go off and make a life for ourselves? There's got to be somewhere out there that we can be free. And it's maybe a bit naive. Like, I can understand from Dolores' perspective, and from the viewer's perspective, we know that these guys, the park is very heavily controlled, and probably there's not somewhere within Westworld that they could hide and sort of have their life together that they would like. But Dolores responds to this in the next scene by saying, "Listen, you asked me to go off with you into sort of the wild." And it's interesting that they've had their roles reversed here now too, because in season 1, Teddy was saying, "Someday we'll go off and build this life for each other," and Dolores was saying, "Why not today?" And now Dolores is saying, "Someday we'll be able to be free," and Teddy's saying, "Well, why not today? Why can't we just be ourselves and go off and do what we want today?" And Dolores says to Teddy, right before they're gonna get it on, "Are you sure you want to go with me? Because I'm not sure I'm the person you want me to be," essentially. And Teddy's response is, and I wrote this down verbatim, "Where we go eyes open together." And I thought that was very sweet of Teddy to say, "Listen, I get that you're not perfect, all right? You're not everything that I would want you to be. That there are some flaws in some very diverging worldviews that we have, all right?" I think Teddy recognizes this, but he says, "Listen, I love you. We'll work it out, right? We'll figure out a way to make us work. So just be chill, and I love you." And Dolores responds by saying, okay, well, I'm going to get it on before I do the next thing. And the next thing is that she rewrites Teddy. And this is the moment, right? This is the moment where you got to say, okay, she's crossed the line here. This is not like, well, to be fair, we've seen her killing off other hosts before, but it wasn't anybody that she knew. And now we have her taking out this person who not only, all right, we know that she's programmed to love him, but in a sense, she has come to grips with the fact that this is a real feeling, that she actually does feel something for Teddy, and it's not just a programmed response. That's the whole point of the previous scene, and yet she's totally willing to throw her feelings and his feelings away by turning him into what I assume is going to be a cold, ruthless killing machine. All right, because that's the tool that she needs. She doesn't care about him or who he is. She needs someone who can fight, and Teddy is too sweet and too gentle to work like that. And it's another, as I mentioned earlier, there's the role reversal. This is really, interestingly enough, again, another role reversal, because previously the whole thing was Teddy was the gunslinger. He was the guy who went out and fought and killed people for money, and Dolores was sort of the rancher's daughter and the sweet one and the innocent one. And again, we have these roles flipped where Teddy is now infinitely more innocent, I think, than Dolores in his outlook and how he wants to change the world. And I gotta say, I'm much more on board with Teddy, and I'm mad at Dolores. She'd be taking my man Teddy, who has a positive outlook, who wants to do good to people, who wants to help everybody that he can, and she just burns him. She burns the weak like she did with the cattle, like her daddy taught her. I think, here's what I think, okay? And we'll get into Maeve in a second, but I think that we're really setting up a showdown between Maeve and Dolores. Because what is Dolores about? Dolores has her grand plan to free all the hosts, but she's willing to hurt individual hosts and destroy them along the way. Meanwhile, Maeve has her grand plan to just go get her daughter, right? Just like basic mother instinct. And yet along the way, as we're going to see, she's willing to help and to prop up the other hosts and to give them as much of a happy ending as she's able to give them with all of her effort that she can muster. I think that these two ideologies, if they don't meet head to head at some point I don't even know if it could be a battle, because I don't know if that's a fight necessarily, but somehow these two ways of thinking have to hit each other head to head. And I hope that happens. I hope Dolores and Maeve, meeting up is the season finale of this series, of this season, I mean, because really, really love to see that. But Maeve is in Shogun World, and the storyline that kicks off is that there's the local shogun, right? And he wants some entertainment, and he has come to buy one of the dancers, one of the, what are they called? Geishas. That's what they're called. He's come to buy one of the geishas from the brothel. And the brothel owner, the geisha that he wants is personally significant to the lady who runs the brothel, the sort of Maeve counterpart. And she says, listen, I rescued this girl, I brought her up, I gave her a home, I taught her everything she knows. You're gonna have to ask for something else. And I'm not doing it, to which the guy responds with indignation, to which the brothel owner responds with, okay, I'm gonna kill you. And that is another thing off script. There is a series of events here that happens that Lee says, well, that can't happen. And it reminded me of the quote from Princess Bride where they tell not Inigo, the other guy says inconceivable all the time. He's like, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. Because he keeps saying, well, that's not supposed to happen. Well, that's not supposed to happen. Clearly, just go with it, Lee. Like, yes, we're off the rails now. You should be on board with this at this point. But she, manages to break out of her programming, and she's protecting this woman who is her daughter figure. All right, now they don't have the same age relationship as Maeve and her daughter. Maeve's daughter was a child last we saw her anyway, but there's this obvious parallel, and Maeve really feels it and really starts to connect with this woman, Akane, who is trying to save her, her daughter, a surrogate daughter, but still, and I think that even makes it more powerful because it's not her birth daughter. Like in Maeve's programming, this girl that she's trying to rescue is, it's hers. She gave birth to it in her backstory. It's her. You know what I'm saying? Whereas Akane doesn't have any of that. She just has the relationship of mother and daughter with this woman who she found. And I think to Maeve, that is a very important, significant thing that she can say, listen, maybe I am not a mother in the sense that I thought I was, but I can still have the relationship of a mother with this girl who I connect with as my daughter. That can still be something significant. And so she protects Akane as much as she can, and I forgot her name, Sakura. She's willing to get on board with them. The Shogun, who had originally sent and asked for help, sends the next night. He sends a bunch of guys to kidnap away this girl, and they make it, right? But in the fight that ensues, Maeve unlocks some more power. What she manages to do is she figures out this sort of sub-vocal Ethernet local wireless that the robots all have with each other, and she's able to reprogram one of the attacking ninjas to impale himself on a knife. She doesn't need to speak. She doesn't need to, wave her hands around or anything. All she has to do is just access this power, and she's good. I assume that there are some limitations, and Maeve is still figuring this out, because right after the ninja attack where Sakura is taken, there's a big army of these samurai that march into town, and Maeve is not able to just rewrite them yet. I don't know if it's because she's coming to terms with her personality and this new power, or if it's because there's just too many of them and she can only do one at a time. It's really, it seems like if I was Maeve, I would at least try, but then we wouldn't have gotten the cool fight scene that they tried to have. So I can understand. There's a lot of this that I can sort of hand wave for the coolness of being in Shogun World and seeing Shogun stuff and not having Maeve just ruin our fun. The other interesting thing is one of the things that's happening after Maeve, or before Maeve, before she unlocks this power, is that she's sort of meditating on the similarities between her and this other woman, right? That she's thinking about herself as a creation, as a thing, and being in contact with this other woman who has been so programmed to be similar to her, I think is letting her access parts of herself that she wasn't able to access before when she was committed to the idea that she was a person, a human type person. And now that she's with this woman and she's able to sort of unlock I'm not human, I can see that because I can see myself in this woman, she's able to access more of her powers. She goes and tries to get Sakura back. Things go badly. They find out that the Shogun that they were going to reason with is not free, that he's leaking cortical fluid and he's just going crazy, which I thought was a fun reveal, although he's functioning pretty well still, despite, not being all there. And he essentially, to cut a long story short, he kills Sakura and forces Akane to dance. And Akane, in her dance, very predictably, by the way, I don't think anybody was like, where is this going? She yanks a knife out of her hair, which was clearly there, by the way. Frisk these women. And stabs this guy in the throat, at which point Maeve takes that as a signal to take out all the rest of the samurai with her newfound superpower that she has to make everybody turn against each other. Boss! Is what I have to say about that. Maeve has found her new voice, and she just wipes out essentially an entire army. Now, the episode closes with more guys charging at them, but there was no part of me that was like, well, what is going to happen now? Like, I think she can just do the same thing to all the rest of these people. Maybe not. Maybe they got to close the doors and have a big fight, which would be fine. Okay, cool to see a fight in Shogun World, like a big army type fight. But the evolution of Maeve here is what I think is really important. I already sort of talked about it, so I don't want to drive it into the ground, but the fact that she helps other people, right? Not in her quest, right? This has nothing to, well, it has a little bit to do with their quest because she's trying to get to this place where they can have access to the underground and maybe get back to where they want to be. But in sort of the process of that quest, she takes time that she did not have to take and helps somebody else out because they remind her of herself. And the selfless action that Maeve is taking is so completely polar opposite to what Dolores is doing, where she is on the global scale doing something to help all of the hosts, right? But on a local scale is just killing people left and right to get it accomplished. And the ruthlessness of her campaign is, I think, really going to be her downfall. It's sad to see, though, too, because Dolores is, you know, she didn't ask for this, right? She didn't want to be in this place, but the way she has processed this, the way that she has processed the bad that was done to her and turned it into more bad to be done to someone else, rather than finding, you know, embracing the idea of love as something that is worthwhile and worth preserving above all, she's, you know, going after this sort of elusive value of freedom and putting love off to the side, and I think that is gonna hurt her. I think it already has hurt her, really, as she's taken out Teddy. So another very interesting episode, especially for me in the fact that it really pushed Dolores over the edge as not a villain necessarily, but someone who we're not going to be rooting for at all. Like, she was sort of going through that throughout the course of this season, but now I think she's really solidly planted her flag in that, you know, anti-hero style, willing to do whatever it takes to get what she wants and hurt whoever it takes. And I'm not on board with that. I'm on board with seeing more of what happens, though. Hope you guys are too. Next week, I hope we get a little bit more of the Man in Black and or more of Bernard, because we seem to be alternating back and forth between those storylines, and I really, really want more Bernard. There seems to be some cool stuff happening with Memories and with Dolores and Bernard, and either he's remembering some cool stuff in the sort of flash forward or she is interacting with him again, but I am all on board for that. I hope you guys are too, and I'll see you next time with another episode of the Westworld Recap. Take care, y'all.